happy. What's up, folks? How we doing? You hear me? I bet the music's a little loud. Just bear with me. I'm gonna do a little intro. Not really an intro, just letting you guys come in. I'm peeking a little bit here. Emergency stream, yeah. What up, Tomato? What up, Vish? T-Song, Granite? Alright, just hold on. Just get more people in here. One sec. I'm not in New York right now. That's why this is scuffed. Just hold on. Hold on. Good morning, good morning. What up, Morgie? What up, Kev? I'm not going to be on time for Live and Learn. I might not be able to be there, unfortunately. Family stuff. I'll try to make it, though. Oh, yeah, I don't have a command for member. I'll do it, though. I'll make one. I know, it's early. I know, right? I already went for a walk. Everything's good, guys. We'll see how long it goes. We'll see. Yeah, yesterday was a complete shit show. Yeah. Everything's good, just not the world. Very true. Yo, chill. The music's almost over, Galaxy. All right, welcome. Greetings from an American living in Poland. What up? Dzień dobry. Hillary could have saved us. What up? Hey, everybody, come on in. Funnel through. It's a nice morning, isn't it? 9:45 on the East Coast here. Sorry I've been a little bit incognito except for my Twitter stuff. I do have another article coming up on the weekly Patreon. I know that I've been super delayed on that. That's my fault. Some schedule changes, some personal stuff. But we have some sick art. So that should be coming today. I know that I've been super late on that. So that's on me. But just in general also, I've been out of the city, so haven't had as much access to my regular stuff, certainly not my streaming gear, so that's why the stream is a bit scuffed right now. But we have some, I think, important breaking news here, and I wanted to give you guys an explainer as fast as I could. But first of all, how are you guys doing? Did you enjoy that ludicrous display last night? First person to get that reference gets some brownie points. Did you see that ludicrous display last night? Nice, Aquila. Scuzzy got it. What was Wenger thinking sending Walcott on that early? Cat Quinn, I love you too. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Jay. But I do appreciate all the support, guys. Like I said, schedule's coming. Some things are changing, shifting, and so I super appreciate everyone's patience. You guys have been great understanding all that stuff. My artist too. It's not my artist's fault. It's been completely my fault. But yeah. Thing about Austin, I always try to walk it in. Yeah, that's true. Okay, folks. So let me just do a quick little 5 minutes on the discussion yesterday. When I say discussion, I mean I don't know what it was. A joint address to Congress, not a State of the Union, but essentially a State of the Union by our leader, the fearless Donald Trump. I mean, it was just such an awful speech, really delivered as only an aging, decrepit old man can do. It was just really just a horrible speech. I think objectively good parts about Trump's speech were when he made a kid with cancer a Secret Service agent. I thought that was pretty funny and cool. You know, is it absolutely disgraceful that he's cutting funding for cancer? Yes. Is it absolutely despicable given his efforts generally, with respect to cutting DEI, with respect all that stuff. Yeah, it does rub me the wrong way when you think about it too long. But it was a kind of a cool moment, and it tickled me. Right, it tickled me. It's my favorite thing that Trump has ever done was announce on stage that this kid is now a Secret Service agent. And I don't know if that speaks poorly of me or poorly of Trump and everything he's ever done, but I liked it. It was a good moment, and it was enough to bump him from a D to a D plus for me. But also the other shining moment for him was really the unity. Again, I'm not judging the content of the speech from a like analytical perspective. I'm just merely going off vibes and optics. That's how I'm grading this stuff. The unity from the Republicans in the chamber, I think, was to his credit, and I think it was a nice contrast with what we've talked about on my Twitter and other places, which the Democrats were absolutely fucked. F minus minus minus. Just the signs are so cringe. Who thought up the signs that just say false? Or like, what else did they say? No cuts or anti-Doge. You're not meeting his gaze. You look weak. The vibes were all off. It had this kind of like, I don't know what to say, this boss baby attitude. You know what I'm talking about? I've never seen Boss Baby, but it just feels like that's the word to describe it. It doesn't feel like it's meeting the moment. Everyone looks so old. Like, what is Pelosi still doing there? Hakeem Jeffries, I don't know if he realizes how bad of a job he's doing. And I don't know if it can be turned around from the leadership perspective. Just don't show up if you're going to do that. Or just show up and just stare at him the whole time. Or just do outbursts and walk out like Al Green did. But don't just be there and like half-ass it and look annoyed. Hakeem said the signs were too far. Just wild. Wild, wild, wild. And then the speech, I saw like 12 words of Alyssa Slotkin's speech, and I'm like, this is crap. I don't know who wrote it. Who's writing these speeches? They're just so awful. It's West Wing garbage. It's, oh, Reagan, oh, the good old days, oh, the good old boys. Oh, yeah, we can agree on a lot of stuff. When it should be like fiery, attacking corruption, attacking Trump, calling him names, saying that he's trying to destroy the country, saying that he's breaking the law, and just like sticking to your points. He's going to steal your healthcare. He hates you. He doesn't care about you. But instead it's like this, Democrats, we agree on this, and we should be able to agree on this, but he is just not my leader. That was the kind of feeling of it. It's just like, I don't know who wrote this, and whoever did needs to take a long look in the mirror. Long look in the mirror. All right, but yeah, it's just like, I don't know what to do, what to say. Just shit. Democrats need better leadership, better cohesion. They might win some elections because of all the material harm that's being done to people. But it will be in spite of the Democratic optics, the Democratic vibes, not because of them. And then like Fetterman being like, I'll vote for anything. Get this clown out of my party. Jesus Christ. My 2 cents on the stream layout: full Pisco portrait, too intimate, use sparingly, document only, too sterile, I think, the classics. Listen, I'm not at my usual setup, all right? It's scuffed. It's scuffed hours. I appreciate it, though. Bringing on the firefighter's family to watch you gloat about how God saved me from the bullet is very tasteless. His daughters look like they voted for Kamala. I don't know. It's just like, that kind of thing is par for the course, folks. Everyone is like, but they're just using them as props. Like, who cares? Every president uses people and sob stories as props. Doesn't mean the Democrats should be cringe. Just clap for the kid. Just turn around and clap for the kid. He's a Secret Service agent. Okay, cool. Like, what are we doing? Don't be doomer, though, Kat. Don't be doomer. Oh, Mr. Putin is in the chat. Hello, Mr. Putin. A new party thing is not going to work. If I thought it would work, Potts, I would support it. I just don't think it just won't work. So we're our only train are the Democrats. That's what makes this so aggravating. But yeah, no, do not pretend that there's another option. It's Democrats. We need to just take over the party, clean house, and fill it with strong people. And you can tell who are the people who are annoyed. Are all the base people. I'm just saying. People like me, Josiah, Kyle Kalinske. These are the people that are annoyed. And we run the gamut in terms of ideology. We just want some fighters. But yeah, just be on the tack. All right, let's talk about this Supreme Court decision. Really, really important decision, really critical decision, and it's a good decision. Now, is it depressing as fuck that it's a 5-4 decision? Yes. Is it scary as fuck that it's a 5-4 decision? Yes. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Is it annoying that they even granted an administrative stay in the first place? Yes. But it's good nonetheless. Let's talk about what this case is about. Nominally, this case is about USAID. USAID is what I should say. I call it USAID because, it's fun to call it USAID. But it's nominally about USAID and releasing of funds. And I'll show you the complaint in a bit. But I want you to, when you read these opinions, you need to understand the subtext here, right? Hard to understand cases like Dred Scott, cases like some of the Lochner era cases, some of the Great Depression era cases, without understanding the subtext and the political context in which they emerge. So you should always go into these cases understanding the formalism of the opinion itself. 100%. You cannot abandon the formalism, the legal analysis. That always needs to be in your mind. But don't think like a formalist. Think like a realist. All right? These opinions are written by people. They exist in time and space, and they relate to things that matter to people. So always have to remember, what is this case really about? This case is about power. This case is fundamentally about power. It's about power of Congress. It's about power of the executive branch. And it's about the power of the judiciary. It's basically a case about the entire separation of powers within the federal government. Now, ultimately, the case itself, right, the legal issues themselves relate to this conflict between the executive and Congress. But the procedural posture in which the case arrives 100% relates to the power of the judiciary. And then the lingering, unspoken question about whether the executive will follow what the court says is absolutely a conflict, or setting up for a conflict, between the judiciary and the executive branch. So you have to think about these cases in that context as power struggles. It's a power struggle between executive and Congress, executive to judicial, within the judicial, within the executive. And about who decides what the law is, and who decides the status quo. Keep in mind, just because you have some court orders, and I would say by and large, Trump is losing ground in a lot of these judicial cases, it doesn't mean he's not having an immediate effect that is absolutely unable to be remedied. Okay? Maintaining the status quo, what the status quo is someone fired or are they not fired? Is aid paused or is it not paused? Who's winning in the actual moment matters just as much as who ultimately wins the case. We have a $10 super chat. You want fire response from Dems, and when they do that, they come off as screaming blue-haired liberals. It's not that simple. Your political calculus is wrong. Yeah, no, I don't think that it's a choice between fiery and cringe and not fiery and not cringe, right? Yesterday was not fiery and also cringe. All right. No one comes away yesterday from the Democratic response, which is not fiery, and is like, oh yeah, that wasn't cringe. They didn't come off as annoying and hot and bothered. So if you're cringe either way, if you're coming off badly either way, like everyone who watched that, I think, who has any sense, thought the Democrats looked weak. That can't be the best response. So I just totally disagree that. And again, I'm not even saying like yell and stuff. You can just leave or just sit there and stare. Meet his gaze. But the sign stuff, the kind of half-assed nature of it, doesn't play off well. So I don't know. I feel like yesterday was the worst of all possible worlds. And I don't think that being more aggressive, especially not in the speech. You could say one thing about being in the hall, but in the speech by Alyssa Slotkin, there's nothing preventing her from targeting the administration in a more incisive and biting way. You don't even need to come off as like shrieking or whatever. Just be honest. This is a corrupt administration. They're trying to steal your Medicare, Medicaid. Democrats are here to protect it. But he's giving everything to Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the most, powerful, most rich person in the world. They don't care about you. They don't care about your families. They want to steal your money and do massive tax breaks for billionaires. And just keep doing that. I just don't think I don't think that being weak or doing what was done yesterday is at all the optimal strategy. So I just think that whoever did that super chat, thank you for the $10 though. Ukulele. I totally disagree. I think you're very bad analysis, but thank you for the $10. Where were we at? Okay, yeah. So think about this like a power analysis. Let's start off, I guess, with the summary. Summary is Trump loses, and the respondents here, the plaintiffs win. And we were talking about how the status quo is just as much a victory as like the ultimate victory, who wins in the end, right? And part of the goal of Democrats and people who care about the Republic needs to be slowing things down. The more we can slow things down, the more we can obstruct their aims and slow things down in a way that preserves the old status quo is vital. That's why this TRO stuff, right? Everyone's like, who cares? It's just a TRO. It's just temporary. The TRO is critical. The preliminary injunctions are critical. Because the longer they go on, the more this administration is stymied. The more roadblocks, the more you can stop the accumulation of power. So time is really, the fight here is both for the underlying legal issue, but also for time. It's a battle for time. So think about that as well here, as we discuss some of these more nuanced, critical legal issues. That it's both a fight for the substance, it's a fight for time, and obviously, as I said at the start, it's a fight for power. So why are we here? I'm gonna skip over, the this has been just real quick for a second. This is the complaint, all right? So who's bringing this case? AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition in the District Court for the District of Columbia. And who are they suing? They're suing the Department of State, the United States Agency for International Development, that's USAID, Marco Rubio, the Office of Management and Budget, headed by Russell Vought, and Donald Trump himself in his official capacity. And what did the plaintiff seek? They wanted declaratory and injunctive relief with respect to a series of orders issued by Donald Trump and his administration that illegally and unconscionably froze funding and work related to nearly every United States foreign assistance mission. All right, so this is about the pause, right, to foreign assistance. They cite the exact executive order. They argue that it exceeds Trump's constitutional authority. That's the power, right? The official issue, right, is whether this is an ultra-virus act. Ultra-virus meaning beyond the president's authority to do so, and whether it violates his duty under the take care clause, right? The Article 2 has a take care clause, which says you have to, as the president, take care that the law is faithfully executed. And the law is, appropriating funds for these missions. So he's violating his duty under the take care clause, and by pausing, he's also exceeding his authority. You understand those are two different things. So like one is like, you're not allowed to do this order; it's beyond your power, and even if it were within your technical authority to do these pauses, you're violating your obligation to take care that the law be faithfully executed. And subsequent orders by federal agencies to implement the directive, right? So it's both the order itself, this order, and any kind of order pursuant to it. And it's for this 90-day pause in aid. Recall that the 90-day pause, there's also like a different pause in all federal financial assistance, but there was a specific foreign aid pause that was pursuant to a presidential order. So that's what the complaint is. We're not going to go through the whole thing, right? Much better to go through the court's opinion, which will distill it. So this is the district court. So the district court, right? So this is an original complaint filed on 10th of February, right? And I'm not showing you, but this is the complaint, right? There was a motion for a TRO. Now, a TRO is a temporary restraining order. It's kind of an emergency remedy to make sure that the status quo is maintained, or a status quo is maintained, before some kind of irreparable injury occurs. So shortly after this complaint was filed, they filed a motion for a temporary restraining order. And that's what the district court responded to. The district court, I think, consolidated some cases, right? So see that? Before the same judge in the District of Columbia. This is a district court, right? Trial court judge. And it says, plaintiffs in Global Health Council versus Trump are or represent small and large businesses, and the plaintiffs in AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition are health and journalistic nonprofits that receive federal grant money. In both cases, plaintiffs have brought claims under the Administrative Procedures Act and federal constitution challenging the issuance and implementation of Executive Order 14169, right, from the complaint, which immediately stopped all congressionally appropriated foreign assistance funding pending for future review. So when you see APA, the APA, we've talked about before, is kind of a framework, a statutory framework that all congressional and agency actions are made under, and it gives a right of a cause of action to sue. So you can sue under the APA for certain agency action that is arbitrary and capricious, illegal, but also bringing claims under the actual Constitution, which you're allowed to do as well. So this is kind of a statutory cause of action that can hook into all manner of claims, right? The APA can itself be like, this is arbitrary and capricious because it's illegal under the Constitution. But if for whatever reason, right, the APA review is not allowed under the law, you could try to bring a direct challenge under the Constitution itself. So this is basically saying, what is the cause of action? So the cause of action could be different than like the legal basis of, it's basically the right to sue. Plaintiffs in both cases have moved for a temporary restraining order with evidence detailing the devastating effects on American businesses and nonprofits, which have been forced to shut down programs, to furlough or lay off employees, and in some instances to shutter altogether as a result of the challenge action. So this is telling you, right, that regardless of whether this TRO is allowed or not allowed, whether it's ultimately upheld, whether or not they ultimately win, there have already been irreparable harms done here. People have already lost their job. People have already been forced to like shut down entire programs, and a lot of that stuff isn't coming back no matter what. So just realize that this is what I mean when I say it's a fight for time as well. The longer this goes on, the longer these effects continue to happen. And that's what matters, right? What matters is the actual world. obviously the law matters as well, but like the effects that the status quo are having on individuals is a huge part of all this. Plaintiffs' proposed temporary restraining orders originally sought to enjoin all defendants, including the president, from enforcing the executive order in its entirety. The court held a prompt hearing at which the government rightly highlighted, so it's giving deference, right, to the government's highlighting the importance of respecting the president's Article 2 power, while also recognizing that the harms plaintiffs described may well be irreparable. During the hearing, the court questioned the breadth of plaintiffs' proposed relief, which plaintiffs have since narrowed. So they've voluntarily narrowed what they wanted done in the TRO. And my guess is they've removed the president himself from the scope of the order or something like that. I don't actually know, but we'll see what it says. For the reasons below, the court grants plaintiffs' motions for a temporary restraining order, in part, on narrower terms than the plaintiffs originally and subsequently requested. So he's narrowed both the original request and the subsequent request. Each year, Congress appropriates billions of dollars of funds for foreign assistance, which are then administered by the USAID and the U.S. Department of State. They provide assistance to strategically important countries. On this date, they had an executive order. It started to pause. It directs agencies to determine how to comply in consultation with Russ Vought and with Marco Rubio, hence why they're being sued. The order provides the Secretary of State has authority to give waivers, right? In the days that followed, agency officials took actions to suspend all of the congressionally appropriated foreign aid. Secretary of State issued a memo. OMB's acting director also issued a memo for all federal financial assistance, including foreign aid, right? So that's the famous memo, right, that we talk about all the time. Defendants have halted the obligation disbursement wholesale. Many plaintiffs have adduced evidence of numerous letters terminating programs. Contracts are being terminated. 230 contracts and grants were terminated in just the 2 days after they were sued. Defendants say that the list does not include the contracts and grants canceled by the State Department, may not reflect all contracts canceled by USAID. Plaintiffs claim they have suffered and will continue to suffer enormous and concrete harm to their businesses. And so this is like standing, right? They have also provided support and evidence that defendants' actions have and will continue to have catastrophic effects on the humanitarian missions of several of the plaintiffs. They seek a TRO enjoining them from implementing or otherwise enforcing the executive order in subsequent kind of directions. They sort of consolidated the case, and there were proposed orders that were submitted that were narrowed. And this is the legal standard of a TRO. Now, this is really important, guys. So the procedural posture of this case will help you understand some of the complaints, both of the dissent and, frankly, of the plaintiffs. What you'll see when we go to the SCOTUS opinion is that the dissent is worried a lot about the separation of powers issue here. And so the notion that the TRO is doing a particular thing and it's issued by a singular judge in a district court, that's going to be sticking out for the dissent. The plaintiffs are saying, hey, these TROs are typically unreviewable. And so the fact that you would be appealing a TRO like this, that itself is problematic because you're not supposed to be able to appeal those TROs. A plaintiff seeking a TRO must have a showing that he's likely to succeed on the merits, big one. He's likely to suffer irreparable harm, big one. Balance of equities tip in the favor, big one, or not as big one. The first two are the most important. And that an injunction is in the public interest. Citing a recent case. And this is, just a little footnote about the standard. At least at this early stage, the court finds plaintiffs have met their burden for temporary emergency relief, although not within the breadth they initially or subsequently proposed. Court begins with irreparable harm. Given the scale of the disruption, it's pretty obvious that they have met the irreparable harm, right? And here are a bunch of, I'm sure, like affidavits and statements showing that getting rid of this aid obviously puts the organizations at risk. Jeopardize vital services. So we don't need to really read that. So just assume, these are gonna really hurt the agencies that rely on the aid. It's gonna be irreparable, and they might have to fire all their staff, and people might have to cut all their programs. At the court's hearing, defendants acknowledge that these types of harms affected their business, as well as the availability of food and medicine are types of harm that are appropriately considered in the irreparable harm inquiry. Defendants offered that some of the contracts terminated might have included clauses that allowed them to be terminated in certain circumstances, but also acknowledged that this approach taken was blanket and not limited to such contracts. Plaintiffs have further adduced evidence that this harm has taken place and is likely to continue. They have proffered specific facts that this has not meaningfully mitigated the harm. Despite his, the waiver ability, right, has not, the fact that you can, right, the Secretary of State has been willing to waive some suspensions doesn't mean that their harm is going to be mitigated. One plaintiff, for example, attests to a meeting with the State Department to discuss what activities would qualify for a waiver. The officer contacted stated that he could not provide any information, so it's not availing to say that there's going to be some waivers. The harm is still going to be felt. Plaintiffs have made a sufficient preliminary showing that the loss of funding at issue threatens the existence of their business. And they have likewise shown that the obstacles created by defendants' conduct make it difficult to accomplish their primary mission. These other plaintiffs have also done that. Multiple plaintiffs have that had not previously received terminations or stop work orders have started to receive them. At the request of the court, defendants submitted documentation showing that just in 2 days they have canceled more contracts. So yeah, pretty clear there, right? Irreparable harm. You're going to destroy our businesses. We're going to have to fire people. And so this is the more meaty part of it, which is, are they likely to succeed on the merits? It also appears, at least at this early stage, plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits. Between the two cases, plaintiffs challenge the actions at issue as arbitrary and capricious in violation of the APA, contrary to law in violation of the APA, in violation of the separation of powers, and in violation of Constitution's Take Care Clause and ultra vires. Okay, so this is a statutory APA claim. This is a statutory APA claim, 2. 3 is a constitutional separation of powers claim, saying, hey, you're taking away Congress's power. 4 is you're violating your requirement to take care of the laws faithfully executed, executive. And 5, ultra vires, president, you don't even have the ability to do this kind of thing. So it's kind of 3 different flavors of the same thing, which is you're not supposed to do this under the Constitution. You're not supposed to do this under the Constitution because you're intruding on Congress. You're not supposed to do this under the Constitution because you're not fulfilling your requirement to take care of the law be faithfully executed. And you're not allowed to do this because you don't have the power to do this under the Constitution. So it's kind of 3 different flavors of saying the Constitution doesn't allow for this. The court need only find that plaintiffs are likely to succeed on one of these claims for the factor to weigh in favor of the TRO. That said, as the court emphasizes the hearing, any relief should be tailored accordingly. The APA permits, that's the Administrative Procedures Act, judicial review of a final agency action and requires the court to hold unlawful and set aside actions, findings, and conclusions that are arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion or otherwise not in accordance with the law. So that's the hook-in for a cause of action. The scope of review under the arbitrary and capricious standard is narrow, and a court is not supposed to substitute its own judgment. The court has to confirm that the agency has fulfilled its duty to examine, right? So this is about making sure that the decision makers for final agency action are not like are providing sufficiently detailed rationale for why they did what they did. An agency rule would be arbitrary and capricious if the agency had relied on factors that Congress had not intended it to consider, entirely failed to consider an important aspect of the problem, offered an explanation for its decision that runs counter to the evidence, or is so implausible that it could not be ascribed to a difference in view or the product of agency expertise. This is pretty deferential to the agencies, but it also has some teeth. If you recall the rescinding of DACA, do you guys remember the DACA rescission was struck down by the Supreme Court? Trump tried to get rid of DACA, and it was the APA that ultimately protected DACA, because the initial memo that they wrote in support of the rescission of DACA, the only stated rationale at that time was, we think DACA is illegal, and therefore we're going to get rid of it. And Roberts is like, you didn't consider anything other than that when you made this decision, and therefore, right, like you did not offer, you entirely failed to consider an important aspect of the problem. All you did was run a legal analysis, and so your initial memo was insufficient, right? Not that you don't have the power to do it, but the way you did it was arbitrary and capricious. Here, the stated purpose in implementing the suspension of all foreign aid is to provide the opportunity to review programs for the efficiency and consistency with priorities, right? So that's why they're analyzing the purpose. They're saying, we need to do this to analyze, to review these programs. However, at least to date, defendants have not offered any explanation for why a blanket suspension of all congressionally appropriated foreign aid, which set off a shockwave and upended reliance interests for thousands of agreements, was a rational precursor to reviewing programs, right? You haven't connected the stated objective to what actually you did. The most defendants offer is the possibility that some of the abruptly terminated contracts might have had clauses which allowed termination. However, as noted, defendants have acknowledged that they implemented a blanket suspension that was not based on the presence or consideration of such contractual terms. To be sure, there's nothing arbitrary and capricious about executive agencies conducting a review of programs, but there has been no explanation offered in the record, let alone a satisfactory explanation, including a rational connection between the facts found and the choice made, as to why reviewing programs, many long-standing and taking place pursuant to contractual terms, required an immediate and wholesale suspension of appropriated foreign aid. Plaintiffs have also shown that the implementation of the blanket suspension is likely arbitrary and capricious given the apparent failure to consider, right? So one is, you have not even connected why you suspended the aid for your stated rationale of review. Like, why do you need to do a blanket suspension in order to review? And that's, by the way, what a lot of people have been saying, right? You also didn't consider a major issue. You didn't consider the reliance interests when you did this, when you pause everything. That's another APA problem, right? One thing is for you to consider it and in your memo write about why it's not, why you ultimately do the same thing anyway. It's about writing a convincing memo in many ways. At the court's hearing, defendant's principal argument was that the State Department and USAID's actions taken to implement a blanket suspension of appropriated foreign aid funds should not be considered agency action within the meaning of the APA. Defendants observed that the president's own actions are not reviewable under the APA because the president is not an agency. It follows that say that an agency's actions implementing the directive should not be considered an agency action. That's a pretty interesting thing, right? So basically they're trying to, and this is why it's very important to understand the power game that's going on here, right? What they're saying essentially is they want to get rid of APA court review, right? Judicial review. As long as the president is making a directive, and their theory is that the president is a branch unto themselves, and the presidency is the executive branch, that as long as they're just implementing what the president wants, you can't even review under the APA. So this is what I mean when, like, it's very important to do a powers analysis here, because this argument is quite shocking in the sense that think about how APA is one of the main sources of review of executive action. Gotcha? Or got it? The APA is like one of the major frameworks that we are able to challenge what the president's agencies are doing. And so by saying that, anytime the president is sending a directive and you're just implementing it, you can't review it. It's a pretty brazen interpretation of what the APA was supposed to do, which is to like keep the executive in check and provide some federal court review. So this is if the court accepted this argument, it would be a pretty radical undermining of the court's own authority to review what the executive branch is going to do. And obviously, APA is what? The Administrative Procedures Act. It's a law passed by Congress that allows and gives the ability for people to sue in federal court to challenge the action by agencies. So what the president is saying, what Trump and his stooges are saying is, as long as we're just implementing what the president wants, this law is a nullity. Like, you can't even review what we're doing. So it's pretty brazen, and it shows that this executive branch, what they want to do is they want to accumulate power and they want to remove federal review or federal court review of what they do. And obviously, the APA is itself a statute, and so they're trying to undermine Congress as well. That's why this powers analysis is really, really important for you to understand what's going on here. This is the president of the United States trying to usurp Congress and usurp federal court review. It follows, they say, that an agency action implementing the directive should not be considered agency action. At least at this juncture, this argument does not appear persuasive. Defendants do not ground their argument in the text of the APA, which specifically defines agency to include each authority of the government of the United States. While it is true that implementation of the blanket suspension of appropriated funds took place in accordance with presidential policy and priorities, as agency action routinely does, the relative directives of the Secretary of State and subsequent determinations of agency heads have immediate effect and constitute the action under review, without any further action by the president. And defendant's argument, at least as it has been articulated to date, proves too much. This is what I just said, right? It would allow the president and agencies to simply reframe agency action as orders or directives originating from the president to avoid APA review, right? And that's exactly what they're trying to do. So these courts are not dumb, and you can't be dumb either. What he's trying to do is prevent anyone from checking his power. He wants to be a king. And at every stage, all his legal arguments are pointing that way. Defendants will, of course, have an opportunity to more fully develop this argument as it relates to the particular actions in this case at the preliminary injunction stage. For now, however, plaintiffs have shown that they are likely to succeed in the argument that the implementation of the suspension of congressionally appropriated foreign aid violated the APA. So they're not addressing the constitutional issues so far, it seems. Oh, thanks, Josiah. Let's collaborate at 1 for a 10-15 minute about this. Okay, but I'll have to do a call-in. I'm not in New York. Capiche? So maybe you can put up a photo of me. But thank you for the super chat. The final two actions, balancing the equities and the public interest, often overlap in the context of an action to enjoin the government. So these are the other like sort of equities and public interest. There are important interests on both sides, but it favors the plaintiffs. Defendants have rightly emphasized the importance of respecting the president's Article 2 powers, but plaintiffs have emphasized the separation of powers, which demands respect for Article 1 role, as well as Congress's choice to allow judicial review, right? So you're seeing, right, in the balance of the equities, it's explicitly about separation of powers here. Ultimately, plaintiffs have adduced and defendants have not yet meaningfully contested detailed and credible evidence of harm to countless American businesses. So it really is just saying that, like, hey, the public interest is on the side of the plaintiffs for both the structural reasons and also just like the harm to businesses. And at best, right, the executive branch disrespect is canceled out by the Congress power disrespect. Now let's talk about the remedy. Plaintiffs' initial proposed relief asked the court to enjoin the president and enforcement of implementation of the executive order. The court does not find it appropriate or necessary to enjoin the president or the executive order. So it's not directly ordering the president or affecting his executive order. And he's also not enjoining the president or secretary of state's statements of purpose or policy, nor does the court enjoin any aspects of the government's ability to conduct a review. While plaintiffs have made the showing required for a temporary injunction, such relief would not be adequately tailored at this time. So they're saying, we're not actually going to order the president to do anything, and we're not going to order that the executive order is unlawful. We're also not saying that you can't review things, and we're not saying that your purpose or policy is illegal at this time. All we're doing is the narrower injunction that you can't stop the funds from coming through. However, the court also finds plaintiffs' proposed injunctives overbroad. At this time, I think they're just doing the contracts that are already taking place. It is ordered that defendants Marco Rubio, Peter Morocco, Russell Vought, the U.S. Department of State, U.S. Agency for International Development, Office of Management and Budget, and their agents are enjoined from enforcing or giving effect to these memorandums. They can't suspend or pause aid, and they can't terminate contracts. So that's what the district court found. All right. So this is going to be helpful for you to understand what happened next. So this is February 13th, 3 days after they filed the complaint. So then, a week later, they have to come back because they're not listening. That is, Trump and his administration are not listening. That's one of there have been multiple instances in which the Trump administration is just ignoring court orders. They're being cute about it, and they're like, no, we just don't understand the order. But this is now the second case, or at least the second case that I know of, where they're ignoring court orders. Defendants have filed a status report in both cases concerning their compliance with the court's order. As discussed below, the TRO is clear and defendants are correct that it does not restrain the agency's exercise of authorities under law. At the same time, of course, the TRO does not permit defendants to simply search for and invoke new legal authorities as a post hoc rationalization. So what they're saying is you can't just like come back and try to like look for new ways to do what you did. Like this order is clear. You're not supposed to stop this aid from coming through. The AIDS vaccine plaintiffs have moved to enforce the TRO and to hold them in contempt. They oppose the motion. They say that they're trying to comply with the TRO. Obviously, they're lying. As discussed below, the plaintiff's motion is granted in part. They say that contempt is not warranted currently. The court's TRO was clear. It found that plaintiffs had sustained their demanding burden for TRO, including by showing that the suspension would cause irreparable harm and that it was arbitrary and capricious under the APA. It ordered that you can't cancel the contracts or grants. In the status report, the defendants say that they've begun an analysis of the thousands of agreements. They said that all or a large share have been allowed by the terms of the contracts. Defendants also asked the court to confirm their understanding that the TRO does not enjoin defendants from taking actions based on other authorities. They asked the court to modify the TRO. As in the case defendants point to, New York versus Trump, the court's TRO in this case does not restrain defendants from taking actions with respect to agreements based on their exercise of authorities under statutes, regulations, or other legal authorities. While the court made clear that the agencies may take actions on particular contracts pursuant to their contractual terms, it did so because defendants had specifically raised that as a concern, and in the interest of ensuring its temporary injunction was as tailored as possible. However, nothing in the TRO limits the agencies from conducting an individualized review and taking action as to a particular agreement where the agency determines that it has authority to do so. Having confirmed the TRO does not restrain the agencies in this respect, the court denies. So, but what they're saying is like, but hey, some of these contracts allow us to do this. And they're saying, yeah, if the particular contract allows you to do it, it allows you to do it and you can do it. But it doesn't allow you to just suspend while you review. The whole point of our issue in the TRO was to stop the blanket suspension, not that you can suspend it while you look through all the contracts. And so basically they're like, you have to do this. It's an emergency posture. You need to, and the court held a hearing within 1 day of being assigned to the case. And it's going to, I think it's going to hold another hearing, right? Or it does. Yeah. They have to, there's this quick briefing schedule. And then what happened was there was a hearing and there was a minutes order on February 25th, 2025. That's a minutes order is kind of like an order said in like a kind of hearing. So it's not like a written order. It's like a stated order. And they're like, yeah, you are ordered to comply by this date, the 26th of February. Then they file in the District Court of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals. And understand, right? This is so this is where the other powers analysis comes in play, the judicial versus executive. Which is, this is a TRO. TROs are normally not appealable because they're emergency in their nature. So you're not supposed to really, in the normal case, appeal TROs. But they did it anyway. They appealed it to the Court of Appeals. And this is what the Court of Appeals said. It said, upon consideration of the emergency motion for immediate administrative stay and for a stay pending appeal of the TRO, ordered that the motion to dismiss be granted. The motion to dismiss of the emergency motion. Appellants, that is the government, have not shown that the district court's minutes order, which enforced previously entered TROs, had the effect of granting an injunction that is appealable. So they're saying this is not even appealable under the law. So you haven't, they basically issued a motion saying that this had the effect of a preliminary injunction, which makes it appealable right away. Right? And they're like, no, you didn't meet that burden, so this is not appealable. Appellants did not appeal the district court's TROs. They now asked us to stay the orders enforcing the TROs. A TRO is a temporary measure to preserve the status quo ante during the pendency of a proceeding for preliminary or permanent injunctive relief. TROs are generally unappealable because review before the district court has finished its work and issued a ruling on the preliminary injunction would disrupt, if not render obsolete, the proceedings in the district court. Right? There's a reason why courts would not like this. If the whole point of having this kind of staggered court system is to funnel everything through the trial courts, and only when the trial court has made a record and done its work, only then to go to the appeal court. That would all kind of be obviated if you could just appeal these emergency orders before they have had the district court has had a chance to meaningfully review what's going on. So that's why they're usually not appealable. It's about judicial economy. That reasoning, that is the reasoning about TROs generally being unappealable, applies with at least the same force to a later issued order seeking to enforce an unappealed TRO. Appellants cite no case that has held that such a later issued supporting order is appealable. So they're saying that applies both to the original TRO and the second TRO that they had to put in place enforcing the first TRO. Appellants argue that the enforcement orders are appealable under 28 U.S.C. section 1292A1 because they go beyond preserving the status quo. So they want them to treat it as a preliminary injunction as opposed to a TRO. Appellants, however, have not shown that the enforcement orders disrupt the status quo by requiring them to do anything more than they would have had to do absent the TRO, which are the subject of ongoing preliminary injunction briefing. So they haven't met their burden of showing that the enforcement orders are appealable. So this is not, right? So the only thing that this Court of Appeals has decided, and this is important for us analyzing the Supreme Court, the only thing they've said is we don't have jurisdiction to hear this appeal. So we're dismissing it. And to the extent that you're asking for mandamus relief, it's denied. That means, so mandamus relief is kind of an even more emergency remedy. It's basically saying, hey, tell this court to do something or tell this person to do something. It's a really, really tough remedy to get, mandamus. So they're basically saying, we don't have jurisdiction under the normal appeal process because TROs are not appealable, and you haven't shown that this TRO is like a preliminary injunction masquerading as a TRO, and so this is not appealable. And to the extent that you're saying this is for mandamus review, which is this kind of like extraordinary remedy of a higher court, you're not going to meet that very, very, very high standard. And because we're dismissing the appeal and we're dismissing the mandamus, we're not going to stay, right? Like if the whole thing is being dismissed, why would we stay something pending nothing, right? So that's what is going on here. They're not actually ruling, right? The Court of Appeals is not actually ruling on any of the actual factors. They're not saying that the district court is likely right on the merits. They're not saying that the district court is likely right on the question of irreparable harm. But they're just saying basically we do not have the power currently to review this case. And again, it has to do with judicial economy and following the law of what the court's allowed to do. Now, what the government would argue is the court isn't even allowed to do this, right? The court is not allowed to order us in this way. And so you need to do this to preserve the separation of powers. What this court might respond is, no, the separation of powers would be undermined if you ignored the law on what's appealable and what's not appealable, and if you ignored the judiciary's, right, standard practices with respect to what's appealable and what's not appealable. So that's the Court of Appeals decision. And immediately, Trump appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did administratively stay the orders. And they did so like right before it was to take effect, right, on the 26th. So it was very, 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 very quickly. And I criticized the court for even granting this. So that's the kind of backdrop of what's happening here with the Supreme Court opinion, right? We have a case where the underlying issue has to do with the pausing of aid. The aid was paused on the Administrative Procedures Act basis. It was done so through two TROs. The first initial TRO, which was not appealed, and the second TRO enforcing the initial TRO. And Trump tried to appeal the TRO and was rebuffed by the Court of Appeals, but there was a small admin stay by the Supreme Court. So the issues that should be floating through your head right now are, one, the merits issues, the merit issue here that's appealable, being that it's arbitrary and capricious, the pause under the Administrative Procedures Act, because they either did not consider a major issue, or because they failed to connect the review with the blanket suspension. So there's a lack of connection between the policy and the stated aim. And obviously because they didn't consider a major issue. So they're not even really dealing with the underlying constitutional issues. So just be aware of that. But the other kind of separate issue is the procedural posture in this case, which is Trump even allowed to appeal this? And all of this is raising, as I mentioned at the start, separation of powers concerns for Congress, for the president, and for the courts. So it's a very interesting dynamic here. It's a jostling for different power. And you'll notice here, right? This court is saying we don't have the power to review this. But in saying that we don't have the power to review this, they're essentially saying this district court has the power right now to do what they're doing. So in this declination of appeal authority, they are in essence, for the time being, though not explicitly signing off on what the court did in the trial court, they're essentially allowing the trial court to have the power it does over the executive branch. So notice that kind of, I don't know, you could think of it, it's not a contradiction, but it is the court, the Court of Appeal saying we don't have the power to review this, which is essentially saying the district court has the power to do this. That brings us back to what happened today. And we'll read this entire short opinion and then the dissent, what they're complaining about. On February 13th, the District Court for the District of Columbia entered a TRO enjoining the government from enforcing directives pausing disbursement of foreign development assistance funds. That's the first TRO, right? The present application does not challenge the government's obligation to follow that order. And Roberts is stressing this. Why do you think he might be stressing this, those of you in the chat who are following along? It is a true statement, but Roberts is stressing this, and think about that. Because he's a coward. You might take it that way, but and I think you're getting on the right track there. But Roberts is stressing that, hey, you're not challenging that you have an obligation to follow the order. Any thoughts? It is a true statement. It is a true statement formalistically. Of course, we have to look beyond the formalism. Any thoughts? I'll give you guys another 30 seconds. He wants to have his cake and eat it. He doesn't want to make it seem like a constitutional crisis. Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah. So there's a lot of talk about ignoring court orders. There's a lot of talk about, a standoff between the court and the president. He wants to downplay that. Saying, hey, president, you agree that you have to follow the court orders. So you're not denying that you have an obligation to follow orders. So you agree that you're bound by the court's decisions. Right. So you can already see there's and how I read that is a kind of even though it's a true statement, it's a kind of tentativeness about, and I would read it a little bit as fear from Roberts, who I assume wrote this. On February 25th, the district court ordered, that's the minutes order, the government to issue payments for a portion of the paused disbursements, those owed for work already completed before the issuance of the district court's temporary restraining order, by 11:59 p.m. on February 26th, stressing the limit of the order, right? it's a true statement, but the stressing here of like, hey, this is just for the work already completed, and it's just for things that happened before the TRO. I don't understand how the immunity interacts. So the immunity thing doesn't directly coincide with this, but it's relevant for other reasons, as we'll talk about in our wrap up. Several hours before that deadline, the government filed this application to vacate the district court's February 25th order, that minutes order, and requested an immediate administrative stay. And look, I was so nice to you. The Chief Justice entered an administrative stay and referred the application to the court. The application is denied. So I'm reasonable. You asked for something, I gave it to you. And I referred everything to the whole court, and guess what? Wouldn't you know it, the court denied your application. Given that the deadline of the challenge order has now passed, and in light of the ongoing preliminary injunction proceeding, the district court should clarify what obligations the government must fulfill to ensure compliance with the TRO, with due regard for the feasibility of any compliance timelines. Saying, hey now, you're not in contempt. Don't worry, you're not in contempt. District court, you have to clarify what before anything happens, before no one can accuse anyone of not following orders. We're going to punt this back to the district court, and so there's no violation of anything. You just need to make sure that you're being sufficiently clear. When the court has been abundantly clear already, right? So even this is a kind of posture of, hey, we want to head off any discussion that there's a big standoff with the courts. And you know what? Currently, you don't even have any obligation, government. We're just going to toss it back to the district court first. And they'll handle it. And they'll make things more clear for you. The order heretofore entered by the Chief Justice is vacated. So I read this. Can the president pardon contempt of court charges? I don't see why not. And the court can just reimpose, you know? But that would be obviously a constitutional crisis. I guess some of the dumb lawyers I talked to would be like, oh, no, because the president technically has the power to pardon. That's their view of constitutional crises. If it's technically legal, there's no crisis. So yeah, I read this as a very tentative, kind of trying to avoid conflict. It's a big win, right? For the Republic, for the separation of powers, but you can also see some trepidation here, both in the language, the emphasis that, hey, we're all on the same page here, the passing the buck to the court as opposed to the government, saying clear up your order, even though it's pretty clear. It seems like there's an inherent fear here that this could be taken the wrong way, but of course, the way this is going to be taken is giant L for Trump administration. Supreme Court orders them to be. So it's all kind of moot, right? In that how this will read politically is a huge L. Well, I think I have VODs crystal clear. So you can just look at the VOD. So that's the entirety of the opinion. It's just saying, but notice, this doesn't mean, so Trump does have some wiggle room for now. Trump would not be in contempt, I don't think, by continuing to do what they're going to do, because the court pretty clearly here is saying the district court should clarify. Now, the district court's going to be a little exasperated because the district court's like, I've been clear. I've made 2 orders. They're plenty clear. And okay, who cares? The timeline has now passed. My order was clear. But the Supreme Court here is pretty clearly saying, hey, before anyone accuses anyone of not following a court order, let the district court clarify first. So I would agree that there's a bit of wiggle room currently. But just until the district court orders, which by the way, I expect the court to do quickly, all right? I don't expect there to be a big amount of wiggle room, and then we'll come to see if there's a compliance. But yeah, that's the full order. Here's the dissent, and you'll probably start to see some of the issues that I've already raised for you, and I've sort of teed up. Justice Alito, with whom Thomas, Gorsuch, and by the way, this is the liberals plus Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett. Alito, who Thomas, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh joined, dissenting from the denial of the application to vacate order. They would have vacated the whole order. Does a single district judge who likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out and probably lose forever $2 billion? The answer to that question should be an emphatic no, but a majority of this court apparently thinks otherwise. I am stunned. Alito, by the way, is such a partisan hack. This language is not, in my opinion, not becoming of the court. Maybe for a dissent, and you know what? Maybe it's my political bias here. But look at the framing here. Does a single district court judge who likely lacks jurisdiction, the court lacks jurisdiction, have the unchecked power, unchecked. They were checked by the Court of Appeals. They were checked by your own court, the Supreme Court. So there's checks here. So I don't even think this is honest to compel the government to pay things out, right? And think about how you would frame this under the Biden administration, right? Does a single court have the power to stop the Biden administration from giving needed relief to thousands of Americans who have student debt issues under congressional statute? So this framing it's so obviously phony that this court, Justice Alito specifically, has no problem with a single district court judge issuing wide sweeping orders to an administration, so long as it's a Democratic administration. So this to me is political signaling. It is not even trying to hide the ball here. And the notion that the court wouldn't have jurisdiction is, in my opinion, wild. In capsule form, this is what happened. Respondents are a group of American businesses and nonprofits that receive foreign assistance from these two agencies. They brought suit and claimed that the current administration's temporary pause is unlawful. On February 13th, they issued a temporary restraining order requiring the government to halt its funding pause. It based that decision on a finding the respondents are likely to succeed in showing that the government violated the APA. After issuing the TRO, the district judge grew frustrated with the pay. So already downplaying the district court's decision to issue a second order, right? Saying he grew frustrated with the pace. No, they weren't following the order, right? But the way they're framing it as, oh, it's this district judge, he's just being a little upsetty spaghetti, right? The judge brushed aside the government's argument that the sovereign immunity barred the enforcement order. Sovereign immunity barred the enforcement order, and he took two steps that, unless corrected, would prevent any higher court from reviewing and possibly stopping the payments. First, he labeled the order as a non-appealable TRO, and second, he demanded the money be paid within 36 hours. So what he's saying here is, hey now, if you issue payments of $2 billion, once you pay, that money's gone. And so it's the same kind of concern, by the way, raised by the plaintiffs. The plaintiffs say, hey, once you pause this funding, we're going to be out of business. And then Congress's goal will be frustrated because we'll be unable to do what Congress told us to do. Alito is responding, hey, once you pay the money, it's done. The money's gone, and we can't remedy it if the district court made a mistake. That's why it's important for you to realize that this is a fight against time. That these TROs, they seem like temporary, and in some way they are, but they're a fight for the actual stuff that happens on the ground. You see that? On both sides, right? If there is no TRO, then many of these organizations and programs permanently go away. If there is a TRO, then the money's gone. And all that is relying on the district court being correct. So says Alito. Now, in reality, there were two courts that appealed whether or not this TRO should be construed as a preliminary injunction, both the District Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. So that's review. And the TRO was appealable in a sense. And they applied the standard of whether or not the TROs should be appealed or not. This left the government little time to obtain some review of what it considered as a lawless order, right? So, again, even just the framing here is providing sympathy for the Trump administration. That is what the pundits are saying. This order is lawless. And it seems that Alito probably agrees. The government moved for a stay pending appeal in the district court, but the judge shrugged off. Again, another shrugged off, right? Shrugged off, grew frustrated, brushed aside. And you can see Alito fucking hates the district court judge. And this is the legal version of talking shit to the district court. And you see that, right? Grew frustrated, brushed aside, shrugged off. This is meant to imply unreasonableness. And it's not even like, by the way, that's not a controversial analysis that I'm providing. The government's sovereign immunity argument, right? More immunity arguments, right? Now, sovereign immunity is a well-established immunity doctrine. But of course, the government, when they made the APA, waived sovereign immunity. Right? The government, by making a law that gives you the right to sue the government, was waiving sovereign immunity. So I don't know what they're going to say here. And ignored the government's representation that most of the money in question, once dispersed, could probably not be recovered. But the same is true on the other side, Mr. Alito. The same is true if the government doesn't issue the money, then they'll never be able to pay it because those agencies and programs will go under. The government quickly filed an appeal with the Court of Appeals, but with only 4 hours to spare before the payment deadline, the D.C. Circuit dismissed the government's appeal because it took the district court's TRO label at face value and determined it lacked appellate jurisdiction. Again, more loaded language here. It's saying the Court of Appeals didn't really truly consider whether or not this was a TRO or not. They didn't really apply it. They just took him at face value, which is not true, right? They're citing the case law about whether or not it should be construed as a preliminary injunction. Here they are citing it. So they did consider, right, whether or not the district court was right. They just came out a way that you don't agree with, Justice Alito. But the way they frame this is they're saying the Court of Appeals they didn't do their job. They didn't take a second close look at what's going on here. So this is highly critical of the lower courts. It's saying this guy has a vendetta. He's brushing things aside. He's not considering it. And look at this, look at this Court of Appeals. They're also being irresponsible. They're not considering what they should consider. They were rushed, and so they didn't actually. They were tricked and duped by the district court. So it's highly, highly critical of the lower courts. With nowhere else to turn and the deadline fast approaching, the government asked this court to intervene. At the last moment, the Chief Justice issued an administrative stay. Unfortunately, a majority has now undone that stay. As a result, the government must apparently pay the $2 billion post-haste. Apparently pay, right? Look at that. Must apparently pay. Uh-oh. What does that mean? Are you suggesting they might not have to? Not because the law requires it, but simply because a district judge so ordered. This is a remarkable dissent. It is saying the district judge was lawless, that the law doesn't require this. So it is absolutely providing ammunition to Trump and his media people to say, look, even Alito agrees, right? And this is, by the way, it should be interpreted as an attack on Amy Coney Barrett. That's how it will be taken by Trump world. They'll be attacking her. They're saying, look, she betrayed us. This is lawless. Alito says, Thomas says, Gorsuch says, Kavanaugh says. As the nation's highest court, we have a duty to ensure that the power entrusted to the federal judges by the Constitution is not abused. Is not abused. The court failed to carry out that responsibility. So Alito is saying we abuse, the federal judges are abusing their power. Remarkable. Time does not allow a lengthy discussion of the legal issues presented by this case, but a brief summary suffices to show the district court's order should be vacated or at the very least stayed. To start with, it is clear the district court's enforcement order should be construed as an appealable preliminary injunction, not a mere TRO. So this is the issue about appealability here. A TRO, as its name suggests, is temporary, and its proper role is to restrain challenged conduct for a short time. That the order here, which commanded the payment of a vast sum that in all likelihood can never be fully recovered, is in no sense temporary. I mean, this is kind of just begging the question. Again, the truth is, the irreparable nature of it is true on the other side as well, right? To the extent that it can never be recovered, the injury for the plaintiffs can never be recovered. So it's equal and opposite. And how Alito is missing this, it's just so, it's such an obvious comeback. Alito is such a partisan hack. But you guys understand that, right? What he's saying here is true. When you pay that money, it's not going to come back on a separate opinion. But that's true on the other side as well. And so at most, it cancels out. Nor did the order merely restrain the government's challenge action in order to preserve the status quo. Rather, it acts as a mandatory injunction requiring affirmative action by the government. In what respect, Charlie? It's saying that you have to do what you were going to do. Restraining you from enforcing an order, stopping you from doing something. And given its likely irreversibility, the district court's enforcement order effectively gives respondents a portion of the ultimate relief they seek. True, but so does the denial. For these reasons, the Court of Appeals had jurisdiction, and we have jurisdiction to review. Even if the majority is unwilling to vacate the district court's order, it should at least stay the order until the government is able to petition for a writ of certiorari. While that happens, by the way, there's no the plaintiffs are going to be irreparably harmed. So just keep in mind, everything he's saying about unable to recover, all that stuff, is true for the people who receive those funds. In considering whether to issue, thank you for the $10, Bazakra. In considering whether to issue such a stay, we ask at minimum whether the moving party is likely to prevail on the merits and whether that the moving party is likely to suffer irreparable harm. And look, direct shots at Barrett. To the extent that likelihood of certiorari is a relevant factor, it is met here. Recent years have seen a sharp increase in district court orders enjoining important government initiatives, and some of these have been labeled as unappealable TROs. And look at this. So, what do we have here? This is a critical line. It is important for you guys to realize what this is. All right? Who knows what this is? This is huge. Why don't you answer your own question? I want to give you guys an opportunity. Are you upset? Michael? I'll give you guys another 30 seconds. What are this? All right. You guys aren't going to get it. You guys all get Fs. This, SCOTUS justices invoking district court's collective dissent for the practice. They're quoting a case against dissent. So this, what is happening here, the Dellinger case is another big case. And this has to do with the Office of Special Counsel. It's a big case right now about whether the president has the right to fire the head of the Office of Special Counsel when Congress has made them have protection from firing. Okay? That's a big case going on right now. Dellinger is the special counsel, not the DOJ special counsel. It's a separate office. So this is the removal fight. And why did I write 4 here? What this is telling you, and mark it here, there are at least 4 votes to overturn the lower court that said that this firing of Dellinger was illegal. So you have 4 votes that say that this removal protection for the Office of Special Counsel, because they all signed on to this, is illegal. Now, they didn't explicitly say that, But the fact that they're bringing it up, right? They don't have to bring this up. They're signaling to the world that these guys are going to vote with Trump on this important Dellinger case that has to do with the scope of the president's removal authority. That's 4 votes guaranteed, at least. That's my prediction, at least. So this should be seen as fighting words and saying, oh yeah, where do you get 4? The 4 votes on this opinion, like the 4 people who signed on to this opinion. Important government initiatives, right? Enjoining important. So they're saying the firing of this person without any explanation is an important government initiative. That construal is saying this was important for him to be able to fire this person. So it's citing the dissent favorably. So this, I would take this as like the we'll see you in court in a bit on this Dellinger matter. Also, keep in mind, this is another important point. Just because the government lost here and will lose on this $2 billion doesn't mean, right? The SCOTUS could have just been saying we don't have jurisdiction. They didn't tell us the rationale here. So we actually don't know if this were a different procedural posture, whether or not the government would win. This could have been just on jurisdictional grounds. Heads up. So this is a big win, but people shouldn't take it as, oh, we know we have these 5 votes locked in on any other like similar matter. Because this could just be on the TRO grounds. As a heads up. But yeah, this should be seen as kind of like fighting words. Clarifications of the standard for distinguishing between a TRO and a preliminary injunction is a matter that deserves this court's attention at the present time. The same is true regarding the scope of the APA's waiver of sovereign immunity. Aha, okay. This is even more concerning. And I'll tell you why. In close cases, we also take into account other equitable considerations. Here, the factors weigh in favor of a stay. Likelihood of success. The government has shown a likelihood of success on the merits of its argument that sovereign immunity deprived the district court of jurisdiction to enter its enforcement order. That's saying that the district court didn't have jurisdiction, says Alito, to have this order, that this lawless. Sovereign immunity bars a suit by private parties seeking to impose liability which must be paid from public funds in the treasury. Aha. So this is different, right? There's a doctrine of like exceptions to sovereign immunity for non-monetary injunctions. All right. There are kind of like judicially crafted exceptions to sovereign immunity for non-monetary injunctions. But there's a higher bar to force the government to pay something and to waive sovereign immunity under those terms. So Alito is correct about that. But the response is APA, that Congress, when they passed the APA, explicitly waived sovereign immunity. But that is exactly what the district court ordered here. It's saying that you have to pay. Yeah, 100%. That's true. Sovereign immunity may be waived, but to sustain a claim that the government is liable for award of monetary damages, the waiver of sovereign immunity must extend unambiguously to such monetary claims. Attempting to satisfy this strict requirement, respondents point to the APA's waiver of sovereign immunity for certain actions seeking relief other than money damages. That language, as we have explained, distinguishes between specific relief, which is permitted under the APA, and compensatory or substitute relief, which is not. Here's maybe the difference here, though, right? What is being ordered here? So maybe I was wrong to accept the framing here. What is being ordered here? Are they ordering them to issue money from the Treasury? The answer by petitioners would be no. We're not ordering them to pay money. We're ordering them to prevent the implementation of their orders that prevent money from going. Now, whether that matters to you, it matters to me. I think it's a distinction with a difference here. But that's how they might respond, is what we're enjoining here is not, we're not saying that you have to pay like damages or anything. We're saying you're not allowed to issue these memos. But the relief here more closely resembles a compensatory money judgment rather than an order for specific relief. Sovereign immunity thus appears to bar this sort of compensatory relief. But it's not really compensatory relief. It's targeted at a bunch of memos, right? It's not compensating damages. It's stopping enforcement of the memos. There hasn't been a showing of damages. That showing has only been made for purposes of the irreparable harm prong of the test for TRO. So it's not really compensatory damage type thing. It's more of an injunction of these specific memos. Hoping to escape that conclusion, respondents point to Bowen versus Massachusetts. In that case, we held the APA's waiver of sovereign immunity covered a district court's judgment reversing a final order of the Secretary of Health and Human Services refusing to reimburse Massachusetts for certain Medicaid expenditures. Unlike the district court's order here, that judgment did not purport to order any payment be made by the United States. Rather, Bowen simply recognized the basic reality of APA review that after a court sets aside an agency action, a natural consequence may be the release of funds to the plaintiff down the road. Well, isn't that what's happening here? Indeed, we have since clarified that Bowen had no bearing on the unavailability of an injunction to enforce a contractual obligation to pay money past due. That sort of relief that appears to have been ordered here, not really. What's been addressed here is the agency action. The agency action is very clearly the memos and the implementing advice from State Department and from OMB. District Court here, however, failed to mention, much less reckon with Bowen or Knudsen before plowing ahead, right? Here's more sort of targeted language. Plowing ahead with its $2 billion order. Ooh, right? So it's characterizing this as money damages. And so you can see the political framing here. In order to take account for our previous suggestion, the proper remedy for an agency's recalcitrant failure to pay out may be to seek specific sums already calculated and past due in the Court of Federal Claims. So go to a separate jurisdiction. Don't ask for us to review illegal orders. The most that can be said is that the district court's denial of the government's motion for a stay pending appeal, it cited but did not analyze a handful of cases echoing Bowen's discussion of the APA's conscribed waiver of sovereign immunity. One might expect more care from a federal court before it so blithely discards sovereign dignity. This is super, super scathing. This is angry. This is Alito pissed off. One might expect more. It's dripping with sarcasm. Finally, the government has a strong argument that the district court's order violates the principle that a federal court may not issue an equitable remedy that is more burdensome to the defendant than necessary to redress the plaintiff's injury. In this case, the district court's enforcement order functions as a universal injunction defining the foundational limits on equitable jurisdiction. This is what Roberts is kind of responding to by saying that the order is more limited. The district court ordered the government to pay all invoices and letter of credit drawdown requests on all contracts for pre-TRO work completed. That order encompasses more than just respondents, and the district court offered no reason why universal relief to non-parties is appropriate here. And this is not the sort of case in which only universal relief is feasible. Even supposing that the APA allows universal vacature of rules in some circumstances, the district court order of direct monetary payments bears no resemblance to that. And nobody has suggested that the government is unable to identify respondents' allegedly owed funds and pay out only to them. Limiting the scope of relief in the manner would be significant. Below, the government represented respondents seek roughly $250 million, still a large figure, but a fraction of the $2 billion. So it's saying you didn't tailor it. The government has shown that it is likely to suffer irreparable harm. It won't be able to recover the payments. I already talked about that. We usually balance the equities and weigh the relative harms in close cases. For the reasons I've explained, this is not such a case, right? It's not a close case. And our analysis could end here that it's not a close case in his mind. Nevertheless, respondents' equitable arguments are insufficient to justify the denial of a stay. They contend that the failure to pay the money in question would cause them, so this is the first time he's dealing with this. They contended the failure to pay the money in question would cause them irreparable harm because without those funds, they would not continue to operate or would have to reduce their work they do. As a result, they claim recipients of their services would suffer. These potential consequences are, of course, serious. But any harm resulting from their failure to pay amounts that the law requires would have been diminished, if not eliminated, if the Court of Appeals had promptly decided the merits of the government's appeal, which it should not have dismissed. If we sent this case back to the Court of Appeals, it could still render a prompt decision. If it decided in favor of respondents, the government would be obligated to pay all the money that is due, and respondents would have suffered only a short delay in the receipt of payments. Again, he's undermining, right, the amount that these delays are costing these different plaintiffs. And if the government prevailed on its sovereign immunity argument, neither respondents nor any of the recipients of their services would have suffered any unlawful consequences. So saying you might have suffered, but it wouldn't have been unlawful. In sum, the factors we consider in deciding whether to issue a stay weigh strongly in favor of granting that relief. Today, the court makes a most unfortunate misstep that rewards an act of judicial hubris and imposes a $2 billion penalty on American taxpayers. Guys, this is money that Congress allocated. Alito's out of his fucking mind. A $2 billion penalty? You mean the law of the land? And he calls that a penalty on American taxpayers. It's absolutely disgraceful. Completely freak reasoning, as who said this? Kid Not King said. That's a $2 billion penalty, so says Alito. Fucking A. Get out of here. The fact this is 5-4 is ludicrous. The district court has made plain its frustration with the government. So now it's calling the district court political. The district court has made plain its frustration with the government. It's basically saying you're a Democrat. What a loser. And respondents raised serious concerns about respondents here are the plaintiffs. Raised serious concerns about non-payment for completed work, but the relief ordered is quite simply too extreme a response. A federal court has many tools to address a party's supposed nonfeasance. So again, never conceding that the government did anything illegal. Self-aggrandizement of its jurisdiction is not one of them. I would chart a different path, so I must respectfully dissent. Respectfully, lol. Anyway, any questions? What happens next? Well, next the court's going to receive it, and the district court, and they're going to issue a new order, and hopefully this time it'll be followed. So contempt timeline's still on the table. We'll see. We'll see if they'll follow. Do you have predictions on where this will be in the next year or two? I think this shows that the court, at least 5 members of the court, are willing to have some limits on the government's just, I don't know, claiming of unlimited power. Happy with the decision? Yeah. I'm happy with it. Somewhat. I wish that they just said you have to follow the order. I wish they had addressed the merits here and said that the APA was violated, likely. Hey, Pisco, happy you're covering that. What did you think of Trump yesterday? I thought he did awful, but I thought the Democrats were even more embarrassing. Relatively speaking. What a bunch of bullshit. Alito needs to go. True. He might retire just out of spite. Can you say who the 4 are? Yes, this is Kavanaugh, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch. That's the dissent. I'm not gonna apply to be SCOTUS now. All right. Any final questions? I gotta bounce soon. Hope you guys enjoy this little explainer. I hope you understand a little bit more about what's going on here. Can you explain the misstep according to the court here? So that was not the court. That was Alito and 3 other justices. Alito plus 3, right? The misstep according to Alito plus 3 is several. So the misstep is, let me pause this. The court should have reviewed, so the appeals court did an issue by not reviewing it, and possibly SCOTUS, to the extent that SCOTUS's decision is premised on their lack of jurisdiction, because TROs are typically not appealable. So they're saying, number one, this is not a real TRO. It's all fake. It's really a PI. And this judge is the sneaky guy who said it was a TRO, but it's really a PI. Then he's saying this it's likely that the government's going to win because the APA does not allow, is not a waiver of sovereign immunity that allows this kind of compensatory relief. And so he construes this as compensatory, like final compensatory relief, as opposed to challenging the agency action of the memo. So he's saying it's a misstep to construe this as anything less than like a damages award. And the Administrative Procedures Act is not supposed to be for like damages, right? And then also there are more like underlying issues about the order being not tailored sufficiently, that it's doubtful that they have the power to like bind universally all like non-parties. And yeah, that the basically the appeals court should have like had a real review of the actual merits of the claims here, and that we think that this is not a close case and that there was no sufficient waiver of sovereign immunity. And so the president has the, or it's not the president has the authority, but that the court is not allowed to issue this relief. The district court. But yeah, it's good that this happened. But yeah, it's foreboding that these four are completely cooked. These guys are totally cooked. And the APA was not necessarily even relevant. No, APA was super relevant here. It was the basis of the district court's order. The basic of the district court's order, the likelihood to succeed on the merits. The merits are APA claims. Specifically, that there was no like rational connection. Call this like the rational connection between we're going to do a suspension of all aid and we need a review. So there was no like, it's arbitrary and capricious because you didn't connect what you did with your stated purpose. And also you didn't consider a vital, like a very important consideration. You didn't even like afford it anyway. And so it's arbitrary and capricious because you didn't consider it. So those are the bases. It wasn't really the constitutional claims. Not that those constitutional claims aren't strong. I love the constitutional claims, but the court didn't need to find for those. They already found for two kind of simple statutory claims. And in a way, the court's also playing a game. They don't want to give the higher courts more things to chew on. These are kind of like very obvious things that they didn't do. So the APA is very important here. But the APA only arises to provide relief in the manner that it specifies in the statute. And what Alito says is it's not supposed to be for monetary damages. But again, as I said, what they would argue back is this is not compensatory monetary damages. This is just incidental, right? The fact that money is going to be paid out is incidental to the actual agency action being reviewed here. It's not done for the purpose of the damages. It's done because the agency action is illegal and unconstitutional. What's a PI? PI is a preliminary injunction. That's a kind of more, it's not permanent injunction, but it's like a more back and forth process, and it imposes, it's immediately appealable usually. So that's what a PI is. And a TRO, oftentimes it's ex parte, so you don't have the other side there to argue. But yeah, that's my analysis, folks. I'll give you, another, minute for questions, and then I have to bounce. Favorite color? Right now, I'm pretty into blue. Think elections are gonna happen? Yes. Will Judge Ali require them to do something? I assume so. Yeah, he's been given the go ahead. I don't know any drama. The other three get to read what Alito wrote? Yes. Nice question, Blue Maga 69 Doritos. If Trump gets to pick another SCOTUS justice, who might it be? Probably Eileen Cannon. Has the admin signaled that they'll obey the decision? No. Make the case for judicial supremacy not being a horrible idea? Well, I think judicial supremacy is a horrible idea. I just don't think that's where we're at. All right, folks. Hey, love you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, post on Twitter. Be cool. Stay cool. And fuck. Sub to the channel. I thought Gorsuch was smarter than this. Nah, Demi. You thought wrong, Demi. Everyone laugh at Demi. I'm just kidding. I mean, Gorsuch had a based opinion kind of in Bostock. But, yeah, no, he's kind of huge allower of executive takeover. But yeah, much love to you guys. Just playing Demi, and talk soon.